Nigeria's budget proposal for 2022 is targeted at economic growth and sustainability. However, President Muhammadu Buhari says the country has a revenue problem that meet the 16 trillion naira expenditure, and government will aggressively focus on revenue generation to close the deficit gap. Arise News political correspondent Sumner Sambo reports.
Laying of the 2022 national budget at a joint session of the National Assembly by President Muhammadu Buhari. The president says the budget of economic growth and sustainability has an oil price benchmark of $57 per barrel, an oil production estimate of 1.88 million barrels per day, exchange rate of 410.15 naira to $1, and projected GDP growth rate of 4.2% and an estimated 13% inflation rate.
Some have expressed concern over our resort to borrowing to finance our fiscal gaps. They are right to be concerned. However, we believe that the debt level of the federal government is still within sustainable limits. Borrowing at specific strategic projects and can be verified publicly.
How to meet the country's revenue target is the biggest challenge facing the government in the midst of dwindling oil revenues and poor remittances by government agencies. But Buhari says despite the challenges, the 2022 budget will focus on providing security, infrastructure, economic growth, and coasting home on social investment programs.
I am again happy to report that we continue to make visible progress in our strategic road construction projects like the Lagos-Ibadan Expressway, Apapa to Oronsoki Expressway, Abuja to Kano Expressway, East-West Road, and the second Niger Bridge. We hope to commission most of these projects before the end of tenure in 2023.
The National Assembly agrees that Nigeria has a revenue generation challenge that needs fixing to reduce borrowing. With a deficit of 6.26 trillion naira, they want the government to explore other sources of funding its projects without borrowing or foreign loans.
The need to enhance revenue generation and collection cannot be overemphasized. The level of budget deficit is high, and both the legislature and the executive should work to reduce this deficit through the availability of more revenues.
The National Assembly will give the appropriation bill the prompt consideration it demands. And for the next 2 to 3 months will be for the strictest scrutiny of the budget estimates.
A full breakdown of the 2022 budget by Finance Minister Zainab Ahmed has now been scheduled for Friday. This is President Buhari's full budget implementation before his tenure of 2 terms end in 2023. The federal lawmakers are now anxious to see the content of the 2022 budget laid before them. And they say President Muhammadu Buhari's statement that all MDAs bring in their budgets before the federal lawmakers requesting for approval of their budget must also bring a revenue profile as to how much they would generate before asking of how much should be given to them to expend is a welcome development. Sumner Sambo, Arise News.
Meanwhile, federal lawmakers are already reacting to the 2022 national budget presented by President Muhammadu Buhari. They express their readiness to properly scrutinize the projections in the fiscal document and fully do their oversight of government agencies to prevent revenue leakage. They want the budget to work for Nigerians.
A lot has to be done, and I think what we must do as Nigerians is learn to make sacrifices, especially in the execution of the budget. We should show personal interest and think more of the things that benefit the ordinary people on the streets. This is what I think we need to really emphasize in the execution of these budgets.
Part of what we have been assured by Mr. President is that no honorable minister, permanent secretary, or head of agency would travel during the period of our budget defense. If we will have to suspend plenaries as a National Assembly for us to be able to ensure that we create the time for budget defense, there will be no excuse why any head of agency will not come to the National Assembly to defend their budget.
I think he tried to also let us know that there will be fiscal policy discipline. And then he accepted that there are challenges that we need to borrow to fund the 2022 appropriation. But my take on it is that it's not about borrowing, it's about being disciplined in the expenditure of whatever we borrow.
We will look into the security budget allocation for 2022, and I think we'll focus more and lay more emphasis on security. We'll give him 100% support. We've been giving him by enacting laws and policies that we felt it will support him in fighting the insecurity.
If we are able to implement this budget religiously, a lot of issues will be addressed. The issue of employment will be addressed because when you increase the level of productivity, we will be able to solve some problem of unemployment.
All right, Tunu, we finally put out this budget for 2023, but the sad part is we're going to borrow our way into that deeply. And some people are saying we can increase the deficits to a tremendous amount, over 10 trillion thereabouts. So the deficit keeps growing even with this new budget. Yeah, this new budget, the deficit is at 6.26 trillion naira, and it is quite sobering. I mean, you recall Rishi Sunak's speech in the Conservative meeting when he was trying to defend the tax hikes. He said borrowing is immoral. Borrowing money that you're going to leave a future generation to pay. And so when I saw this deficit, I'm sorry, my mind went there. And I'm glad that President Muhammadu Buhari actually addressed those concerns that people have and considered that we are right to have those concerns. But as usual, they're on message and they stay on that same message that the borrowing is manageable. I'm not quite sure. And then when you see the breakdown, I mean, Sumner provided us with the projections and some of the breakdown, but when you see that recurrent expenditure is so high, almost 7 trillion naira, you now wonder, where's the Rosoye report? In fact, where's Rotas when you need him? Where is that Rosoye report? And then you recall just last month, the Senate was lambasting NNPC, CBN, the Nigerian Customs Services, for their poor revenue remittance. They're not paying it to the Consolidated Revenue Fund as they ought to. We talked about Dr. Doyin Salami talking about the debt capital. I became aware of debt capital in Nigeria, this $900 million problem, in 2019 because of that PwC report. Yeah. I'm sure people in that field were aware of it years before. And still, it remains a problem. In 2 years, are we still going to be talking about debt capital? We're not exploiting every single avenue of revenue. We're not plugging all the loopholes. And tax, of course. That's another issue in this country. We do need to sort out this revenue problem because we can't continue like this. And subsidies, drinking all the revenue?
We
cannot
continue
drinking all the revenue like coffee.
I think one positive thing that we can say out of all of this is that since President Muhammadu Buhari assumed office, he's been able to keep a proper regular, expected fiscal calendar, making sure that the budget cycle is maintained, is presented before December, and it's approved earlier. In previous dispensations, we had very serious problems. When the Buhari administration first got there, I think they had the same issue, but they managed to correct it so that there can be certainty in terms of what to expect. However, what has not changed is the fact that every Nigerian budget in the last maybe 20 years have always, looked the same. In terms of the labeling, we're told budget of growth. I think the one for 2022 is budget of growth. Or we're given some other phrases previously. And then you ask yourself, what do these labels mean in real terms? Can we assure growth? If you look at the benchmarks, $57 per barrel. It should probably go higher than that before December in terms of the spot price. But we have been told by NNPC in this same country that higher crude oil prices will not help us because of subsidy, landing costs, and all of that. We've been told 1.88 million barrels per day. Okay, can we keep it? Do we have the technology in place to track it? Despite contestations to the contrary. We have also been told that the debt service to revenue ratio is 97.7%. So if you are servicing your debt almost to the tune of 100%, where is the money? It means clearly you have a revenue crisis. You have a debt service up to about 3.61 trillion. You have budget deficit of over 6 trillion. So all the benchmarks look terribly unrealistic. And that going forward, there's not going to be any difference. And that is why I think, we should be concerned about the fact that, the lawmakers on the floor of the National Assembly, their reactions were mixed. They raised the point, look, Nigeria has issues of poverty. It has issues of security. Nigeria has issues in terms of debt to service ratio. So this is not, technically speaking, and I'm just quoting those lawmakers. When we get the details, we'll do further analysis. That this is an unrealistic budget. So the long-term question is to ask, how do you ensure growth? Because they use the phrase growth. Twice this year, the Bretton Woods institutions have had to downgrade not just the international benchmark for global economic growth, but also the growth for Nigeria. And we have experts like Bismarck Rewane, like my brother Tili Adebajo, who tell us that, look, at single-digit growth rate, we cannot even scratch the surface, and that we have to get to double-digit. So when is Nigeria going to get to that point, where in terms of productivity, where in terms of economic policy and fiscal policy, we'll be able to talk about the kind of double-digit growth that can affect poor people of Nigeria like us. Inflation is put at 13%, right?
Yeah, 13%.
Now, how did they arrive at that? So it's not enough to just go to the National Assembly with some of these phantom figures and say, these are the projections. Those projections did not work 4 years ago. They did not work 3 years ago. They did not work last year. There is no guarantee that those benchmarks will work next year. And the bigger question for me is, okay, President Buhari, how does he want to exit? Because by now, the administration should be talking about an exit strategy, a legacy strategy. So if the same strategy is the same old game, even with regard to the budget, then that's sad indeed. However, what the Nigerian people expect is that, yes, appropriation bill, legislative, whatever, what will even be the performance of the budget? In the last, since 2015, what has been the quality of budget performance? Because it's not just about appropriation. The appropriation bill is a proposal about budget performance. Budget performance has not been very good.
Oh, yes.
There's no guarantee that budget performance in 2022 will even be anywhere close to 50%. So these are the things at a personal level beyond the ceremony, because governments like ceremonies, that President Buhari himself should worry about. What is the legacy that he will leave behind? What is the difference, the enduring difference that people will remember? And that's why I think it's useful that Ndudi Elumelu raised those other larger questions beyond the appropriation bill.
It's fast becoming a recurring decimal that budget proposal presentations are becoming like phantoms of the opera. And it is sad what the country has become. The parameters are not realistic. We are borrowing so much, ratcheting up the deficit. And at the same time, corruption is taking it away. So we are borrowing, to service waste and consumption. Personnel costs so high. You talked about your Rossonye report. Nobody's talking about that. We hope to do capital projects. We are not doing enough capital projects. It's not impacting the economy. Amidst all of this, MDAs are still a big funnel for corruption. The other day, the Attorney General asked questions. The Accountant General asked questions about certain MDAs and monies missing to the tune of trillions. We have not gotten to the end of that. Now we'll still give that money to MDAs to do what MDAs will always do.
We're not serious.
We're not ready.
Not yet.
We're not ready. Thank you so much. That's all on News Headline. We'll take a short break. When we return, Michael Wilson, Adesu Omoro, Aaron Akiri, give us updates on global business, COVID-19, sport and activities across the globe. Stay with us.
Welcome back to the Morning Show here on Arise News. Joining us with global business updates is Michael Wilson, joining us from London. Good morning, Mr. Wilson.
Morning. Yeah, everything leading towards the US non-farm payrolls at lunchtime today, both our time scales, and that really will decide where the market actually thinks the tapering exercise in the United States is going, and the extension of that is that the markets will have some kind of data to get their teeth into. At the same time, the US Senate has slapped a sort of little bandage on the debt ceiling saga. It's kicked the can down the road until December, and that really has helped the markets a little. Asia Pacific markets, China's returned after its week's holiday. Not an enormous amount of stories about Evergrande on the front pages there, but it will resurface again, and what the government decides to actually do with it. Another medium-sized China property company defaulted on an offshore bond this week, which I told you about. So there's a load of things actually coming the Chinese government's way. But the PMI outlook, the Purchasing Managers Index outlook, is not that unhappy. Mainland China have also rallied strongly on their return. The other side of the energy crisis, this is an interesting one. I was telling you about how we suspect, according to shipping agents, that 400,000 tonnes of Australian coal has just been unloaded in China. China's now ordered its coal miners to boost output. And this, I think, risks undermining China's own climate change targets. It's ordered 72 local miners to increase capacity by 100 million tonnes. So the energy crisis biting hard, but it is going to be coal that drives it. What that means for climate change and the conference coming up in this country in November to be seen. Japan has penciled in its election for October the 31st. It's an lower house election, new prime minister there. There are certainly stimulus measures happening or going to happen in Japan, which used to be the world's second largest economy. The 225's up by about, the Nikkei 225's up by about 2% this morning as a result of hopes there. But however, again, if there's big tapering with regards to what we get out the non-farm payroll print this lunchtime, well, things will reverse. Semiconductor giant Samsung. Operating profit up 28%, we think. I say we think because what they don't do really there is separate the various divisions, so we don't know where that growth is actually coming from. Most people think that it is still being affected by the shortage of semiconductors and the rapid demand for them, which of course companies like Samsung have not been able to deliver. But we'll see about that. It's very unclear as to what's been going on. But anyway, overall, 28% up. US recap then, as I said, the Senate has allowed the debt limit to increase by about $500 billion, $480 billion. That still has to go through the House, and it's expected that legislation will happen in the next few days. But it does not solve the problem. It's merely a temporary sticking plaster. Jobless claims dropped unexpectedly in the United States yesterday, and bonds, really everybody's onto taper watch, basically. And I think that a figure of about 500,000 jobs added to the economy would probably do it as far as the status quo is concerned. Anything above that, and we've got, taper tantrums go out of the window and vice versa if it's lower. The EU global tax deal edges slightly closer. Now, Ireland, in some measures, has been the richest nation, one of the richest nations in the world. Now, they've agreed to this 15% minimum tax rate. It's a huge shift in their own policy, because one of the things that's been keeping Ireland going is the fact it's a very favourable tax rate. If this is actually now going to be implemented, and the OECD thinks it will be, then it'll mean, I say, that a minimum corporate rate tax of 15%. As far as the UK is concerned, we have a new chief economist at the Bank of England. He's saying that UK inflation could persist for longer than expected. Hugh Pill is called, and unsurprising, really, analysis. I think we've been talking about this for some time. But anyway, so that means that a more hawkish member has now joined the Bank of England, and I think that points to interest rates rising here sooner rather than later, but probably not until next year. Travel firms are looking at the relaxation of the so-called red list as far as quarantine is concerned, and travellers and the rest of it. Nothing really changing. There's a slight alteration about the tests that we all have to do before we actually go abroad, and the lack of quarantine when we actually come back, but it's really not pushing an enormous amount through. I think there's going to be a big inquiry as to how much these so-called companies actually make. Health companies have been making of these PCR tests that seem to me to be box-ticking exercises. But then again, I'm not a health expert. I could be wrong. Oil prices have rebounded very, very slightly. We're going to, that's China basically coming back. 82 I've got here for Brent, 82, 85 a dollar. Again, I think that's dangerous territory, but we'll see about that. And gold, well, as you can imagine, trading in very, very narrow ranges before those all-important jobs figures this lunchtime.
Okay.
That's the global view.
Michael, effectively we have the end of the Mike Ashley era at Newcastle United. But it looks like there are some sides to that confirmation that Newcastle United has been taken over. It's now become one of the richest clubs in the world. The Saudis have been able to get the deal done. But is it, something we have to worry about? That yes, the Saudis are now in charge, but the state will not have control. Considering the fact that the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia is the head of the PIF, right? That's the name of the group that has now taken over Newcastle United. And what do you think of the opposition by the human rights groups? Now, travel red list, which is of interest for us in Nigeria, has been reduced from 54 countries down to 7 countries, will take effect on Monday, October 11. What are the implications for the travel industry in the United Kingdom particularly? Now that is it Scotland saying that, look, this was a 4-nation decision to open up the United Kingdom more to the rest of the world.
Newcastle, I did not know you were a Newcastle fan. You amaze me. I did not know. It's quite extraordinary how these football. Have you ever been to Newcastle? Do you know where it is?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So it distinguishes itself. I'm sort of from just a bit below there, actually, but it's always distinguished itself by having a very, very loyal fan base. And my goodness, it's needed it because it hasn't won a match all season so far. What about the human rights issues? Well, talk about China, talk about Russia, talk about Qatar, talk about all the other rich owners of football clubs around the Premier League. And as I keep saying, it's not about the football, it's about the money. So I think there will be human rights protests, but I don't see anything changing this whatsoever. Newcastle fans like you, Doctor, will have to wait for a number of seasons before anything actually happens because they have to buy new players, they have to buy a new manager, and those results do not happen overnight. So I would expect that what's going to happen is going to be 2 or 3 years before Newcastle drags it out of its woes. And it won't be about the fans. The club has costed itself way beyond what any fan can afford. This is about rich owners, rich television revenues, and the rest of it. That, unfortunately, is the way of the world. As far as travel's concerned, I think this is too little and too late. I think that the repercussions of the travel industry woes will continue for a number of months yet. I think you've got to get public confidence back. You've got to get airlines up and running again. You've got to get everybody's faith in lateral flow tests and all the rest of it going. And people have long memories about this kind of thing. Who might have said? Maybe families have been planning not to go away for some time because of the lack of clarity and the lack of clarity in the kind of information that even the airlines have been getting from government decisions. So it's a mess. And it's like everything else. You can clamp these things on. It's the end game. It's the exit strategy that's the most important thing. And the travel industry is just going to have to deal with it.
All right. Real quickly, Michael, Ofgem is now looking at reviewing, price caps in the UK as regards what happened with the energy sector. So is it a free float once again? Is it UK returning to that, free market when it comes to energy? And secondly, I'm really very interested in what is coming out of the EU. The EU too, they're looking at these inflation numbers. They're saying, there are possibilities that across board, inflation might not be transitory. It has come to stay. What will be the reaction to it in a world where Everybody's in disarray. The IMF is in disarray. Christina Georgieva, there's a chance she might lose her job, she might not come back. You know, everybody's in disarray. America is fighting China and the likes, the EU in disarray, Germany trying to get a deal across for, you know, a leader. How do we fight back?
Well, how do we fight back? I don't think there's any fighting back. I mean, inflation is probably here to stay. I think the difficulty for the EU is there are so many different economies throughout it that one rule does not fit all, and one interest rate does not fit all, and one particular regulation about inflation price rises does not fit all, basically. You've got a huge contrast between, as you say, Germany, which is looking towards its new leader. We don't know how that's all going to work. The new leader of its majority party, should I say. We have no idea how that's all going to unfold. We don't know how the coalition is going to act there. We understand in Germany, for example, as you touched on it, that Angela Merkel did not invest in much in the infrastructure as people would have liked, and maybe the new coalition may be forced to do that. Will that mean inflation? Yes, of course it will. It always does when governments actually spend like that. So the inflation picture, as far as Europe's concerned, is very, very difficult indeed. Ofgem and the new not fit for purpose business model, it's very, very difficult to do this kind of thing, isn't it, for energy regulators to decide how to do it. Do you place a cap? Do you protect the households? Or do you protect the freedom of the market, which the implication of that, of course, is that you protect the existence of smaller companies which come up against the big ones. So this shakeout hasn't happened yet. I think what we're seeing is the tectonic plates of energy moving very, very slowly, but very, very big indeed. I've told you about China ordering its coal miners to mine more, to be more productive. And Russia is flexing its muscles over gas supply to Europe and asking for the new pipeline to be validated across Germany. So there are big things going on. I think that Ofgem will probably have to, as a regulator, will have to sort of stand back from it all and see where the dust settles as well. But no question, energy costs are rising, but they are rising everywhere in the world. I mean, we're all facing this now. And don't get me started about how green energy is going to affect that, because nobody knows, and we've not been told about the real costs. So big black holes opening up everywhere, quite honestly.
Well, again, I don't have a question, I just have a comment. Well, actually more of a whinge and a moan. Your story about China boosting, their coal outputs with regards to this energy supply issue. You recall Xi Jinping stopped short of making any promises about domestic coal production and usage. He only promised that China would not be financing coal production and coal plants abroad. And we can now see why that was an option. And I just really regret the fact that I feel Nigeria missed a trick here. We are a coal-rich country. I remember President Buhari's first term in 2015. The complaint here was that in the West, we were being stopped from really exploiting our coal resources because it's not green, and we're being pushed towards, solar and wind energy, which was more expensive for us because, we had to borrow. And now look at it. Now coal is pretty much verboten in the whole world because of the climate change, obviously, which I would not try to minimize. But I just really regret the fact that we did not fully exploit our coal-rich resources like the West did, because Western industrialization was not built on solar. It was not built on wind power. Sad.
Good old coal.
That's my rant over, my little moan.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Michael. Really appreciate you. We'll talk about COVID-19 now. Adesua Moro is here with us. Adesua, great to have you.
Thank you very much, Rufai. Good morning. Good morning, Tundu. And good morning, Dr. Abaji.
Good morning, Adesua. Today is Friday. No, don't hush me up. Today is Friday.
I thought I could get away with that.
Adesua, it's under control. You don't worry about it. You're not going to hear this anymore.
Immunity.
It's under control.
Tundu, we've not seen anything. You know what they say about seeing? It's believing.
But you should know me better. Okay. I don't make announcements.
That's true.
You know
that's true. Trust you, Tundu. Trust you.
Okay, so Tundu will perform on your behalf.
Tundu has spoken.
We'll set up a committee on that.
Tundu, I need to get you a gavel. I think a gavel.
I would appreciate
will be perfect for you.
I need one around here. I need one.
To you.
A gong will be better. A gong.
Good morning, guys, and good morning, viewers. Let's look at some of the most important numbers when it comes to this pandemic. 236.7 million infections, 4.8 million deaths, and 6.3 billion doses of vaccines. Those are the most important numbers when it comes to this pandemic. However, we do know that this virus can be deadly, but a vast majority of people do recover from it in what is now called long COVID. And I can tell you in the last 24 hours, long COVID has finally been given its own definition by the World Health Organization. Listen to this. The World Health Organization says long COVID occurs in individuals with a history of probable or confirmed COVID-19, usually 3 months from the onset of coronavirus, with symptoms that last at least 2 months and cannot be explained by an alternative diagnosis. There you have it. That's what makes it so difficult. It cannot be explained by alternative diagnosis. The World Health Organization also says common symptoms include fatigue, shortness of breath, cognitive dysfunction, but also many other symptoms not listed, and generally have an impact on everyday functioning. That is the definition of long COVID, according to the global health body, the World Health Organization. But here in Nigeria, the FCT and FCT Lagos and Kaduna State were responsible for the most infections in the last 24 hours. They reported, and they were responsible for a cumulative 200 of the 290 new infections in Nigeria. The NCDC also reported 2 COVID-19 related deaths in Nigeria in the last 24-hour period. You guys spoke a moment ago about the budget of economic growth and sustainability presented by President Muhammadu Buhari to a joint session of the National Assembly yesterday. But let me tell you that this budget presentation by President Muhammadu Buhari was somewhat different. President Buhari spent shorter time than he would normally do in presenting this budget to a joint session of the National Assembly, and it was deliberate. According to the president, there was consultations with his COVID-19 task force and the leadership of the National Assembly. The president, who began his speech, touched on the current realities of COVID-19, and he says that the country will keep in place protocols and guidelines for COVID-19 to safeguard the population. He said the grim realities of COVID-19 and its lethal variant, the lethal variant, are very much with us in Nigeria. He said, and I think this is the most important thing I took out from the president's speech concerning COVID-19 realities. He says, from president to pauper, the virus does not discriminate. So President Buhari, touching on COVID-19 there and reminding all of us, we are still very much in the pandemic. I hear people say when there was COVID or during the pandemic is still very much on. Still in Nigeria, vaccination continues across the Federation. They are available for those age 18 and above, a reminder. And vaccines in Nigeria are free. So to get your jab, it's free. Just walk into any of the registered centers. Sometimes, most times actually, you have to get registered online first before you can get access to them. But it is free, so go get vaccinated. And speaking of the vaccines in Nigeria, the United Kingdom has relaxed its COVID-19 vaccine policy for fully vaccinated travelers from Nigeria. In a statement by the British High Commission yesterday, the UK government added Nigeria to the list of countries with approved proof of vaccination. It says from Monday, 4 a.m., the 11th of October, fully vaccinated travelers from Nigeria who have received the AstraZeneca, including COVID Shield, Pfizer, Moderna, or Johnson & Johnson vaccines will be able to go to England without needing to provide a pre-departure test, undertake a day 8 test, or self-isolate for 10 days, although they will still need to book and pay for a day 2 PCR test. That requirement, I must say, is for everybody on the go list for the UK. That is the rest of the world list. And the UK has said later this month they will ease from the PCR test to a cheaper lateral flow test. The vaccination status for arrivals also affects 36 other countries apart from Nigeria, and that includes India. Remember, India has been vehement about this. And of course, about at least 7 other countries are counted on that list. The announcement also came on a day that the UK government scrapped coronavirus quarantine travel rules for 47 more countries on its red list. Dr. Abati touched on this when he was talking to Michael Wilson a moment ago. Now, the countries include South Africa, Mexico, Thailand. Though this announcement relates only to England, the rest of the nations that make up the United Kingdom will decide what they want. The change comes into effect on Monday as well, And that potentially leaves only 7 countries on its red list. These 7 countries are Colombia, Dominican Republic, Ecuador, Haiti, Panama, Peru, and Venezuela. So those are the countries. And people coming from those countries will require, they will have to do hotel quarantine for 11 nights at a cost of £2,285 or $3,100 for individual travelers. Finally, at a press conference to reiterate the goal of vaccinating 40% of every country's population by the end of the year and 70% by the middle of 2022. The UN Chief Antonio Guterres says vaccine inequality is not only immoral, but stupid, because it will give rise to new variants and more deaths. The press conference was part of an event to launch a new global vaccination strategy and as well called for $8 billion in funds to ensure that COVID-19 vaccines can be fairly distributed around the world. Mr. Guterres was spot on yesterday when he added that vaccine inequality is the best ally of this pandemic. Guys.
Well, I don't know whether we still have a lot of time, but it's important to state the point that the United Nations and the World Health Organization, well, there's nothing new that the leaders of both organizations are saying. The WHO had made it very clear that the benchmark is 70% immunization by mid-2022, 40% immunization on a global scale by the end of 2021. And what they have done is, to move on to deepen the strategic preparedness and response plan that was launched in 2020 and that was again, reviewed in 2021. Now, what the UN and the WHO have both provided is to say, well, this is our plan in terms of what can be done to achieve those objectives. 40% in 2021, 70% in middle of 2022, considering the fact that the original target was that by September 2021, almost every country will have achieved the target of 10% immunization. There are at least 56 countries in the Middle East, in Africa, and other parts of the world have not been able to meet that target. So it's a welcome development. And the gravamen of their proposition is about ensuring vaccine equity, ensuring that this other pandemic, the second pandemic is that conflict between rich countries and poor countries. Poor countries are poorly served, rich countries are overserved. And how do you address that? And what I find, interesting in that document called the strategy is the mandates that both the United Nations and the WHO have defined for countries, for manufacturers, even for civil society organizations, including the media, even for developed countries who make promises. And all of that is spelled out. CSOs, like the media, they're supposed to encourage and help with advocacy. Manufacturing countries are supposed to help transfer knowledge and engage other countries. Developed countries are expected to keep up with their commitments where we have had major issues. International organizations like the WTO, the UN, the WHO, they are expected to monitor and insist on the effectuation of that strategy. But the big question is, do these countries of the world, do they have the capacity? Would they be able to do it? Would they follow the lead in terms of global solidarity, global cooperation, equity, and justice that the leaders of the WHO and the United Nations, Antonio Guterres, are talking about? That's the big challenge. As for the other issues, well, I don't know. We don't have time, so we'll leave it.
All right, so at least people can go to the UK now and not go through that laborious process. That's some good news. Cheering news, yeah.